Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Good. Be seated, please. Om. Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Nice to see you all here this morning, and welcome also to our students watching online. We begin today our study of Chapter 9, Raja Vidya, Raja Guhya Yoga. I'll explain the title in just a few moments, but let's begin with some recitation and get the verses in our minds a little bit. We'll begin from the beginning of the chapter, and as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Idantu te guhyatamam, Idantu te guhyatamam, Pravakshyamyana suyave, Pravakshyamyana suyave, Jnanam vijnana sahitam, Jnanam vijnana sahitam, Yajñatva moksha se shubhat, Yajñatva moksha se shubhat, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pratyakshavagaman Dharmyam, Pratyakshavagaman Dharmyam, Susukam Kartum Avyayam, Susukam Kartum Avyayam. Ashraddhadhana Purusha, Ashraddhadhana Purush, Dharmasyasya Parantapa, Dharmasyasya Parantapa, Aprapya Mam Nivartante, Aprapya Mam Nivartante, Mrityu Samsara Vartmani, Mrityu Samsara Vartmani, Maya Tatamidam Sarvam, Maya Tatamidam Sarvam, Jagadavyakta Murtina, Jagadavyakta Murtina, Matsthani Sarva Bhutani, Matsthani Sarva Bhutani. Nachaham teshvavastitaha, Nachaham teshvavastitaha, Nachamatstani bhutani, Nachamatstani bhuta, Pashyame yogamaishwaram, Pashyame yogamaishwaram, Bhuta Brahnacha Bhutastho, Bhuta Brahnacha Bhutasto, Mamatma Bhuta Bhavanaha, Mamatma Bhuta Bhavanaha, Yatha Kashasthito Nityam, Yatha Kashasthito Nityam, Vayu Sarvatra sarvatra go mahan, vayu sarvatra go mahan, yatha sarvani bhutani, yatha sarvani bhutani, matsthanityupadharaya, matsthanityupadharaya. That's a good place to finish our chanting. We'll come back to the beginning of the chapter. Actually, this verse 2 gives you the title of the chapter, the very first line. Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam is the title of the chapter. Raja, you know, is king. So the king of Vidya, the highest of all forms of knowledge, and Raja Guhya, the most secret, Guhya, the most secret of all forms of knowledge. And we'll see in what sense the secret. We'll see that when we come to that verse. This chapter is part of Sri Krishna's ongoing unfoldment of the nature of Ishvara, the God of the cosmos, and the nature of ultimate reality that we call Brahman. You might remember that when we began chapter 7, we began the middle 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. You might recall, Bhagavad Gita is broken up into 3 groups of 6 chapters. The topic of the not only topic, the main topic of the middle 6 chapters is Ishvara and the ultimate reality, Brahman. And so in this chapter 9, we continue with that discussion. I think that's enough for us to begin our study. Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Shri Bhagavanu Vacha, Idantu te guhyatamam, Idantu te guhyatamam, Pravaksyamanasuyave, Prachyananasuyave, Jnana Vijnana Sahitam, Jnana Vijnana Sahitam, Yajñatva moksha se shubhat, Yajñatva moksha se shubhat. And you notice that this chapter does not begin with a question from Arjuna. Not every chapter does. The prior chapter, chapter 8, Arjuna had, I think, 6 questions? 6 questions. He had we call it a shopping list of questions. And here Sri Krishna just picks up what he feels is the next most important topic to teach Arjuna. And he begins, look at the second line, Pravakshyami, I will tell you. Tell who? You can see the te in the first line and anusuyave in the second line. I will tell te, you, anusuyave. I will tell you why, because you are anusuya. Many meanings. Here, simply pure-hearted one. O Arjuna, you have a pure heart. O Arjuna, you are ready to hear this. So I will tell you what? Back up at the first line. Idam, this what? Guhyatamam, most secret. Most secret what? Line 3. Jnanam, this most secret knowledge. And I'll explain in what sense it's secret in the next verse, so hold on for that. But this knowledge, which is Vijnana Sahitam, Sahita along with Vijnana. So here Sri Krishna is using 2 words, Jnana, knowledge, and Vijnana. That V prefix means there's something more, something special about this knowledge. In fact, very special about this knowledge. So it's not, we've made this distinction in many classes, the distinction between information and knowledge. We live today in the information age, they call that, and we are inundated with information. You log on to your computer and browse the internet. It is staggering, the amount of information out there. all of that information is not going to remove your suffering. So the knowledge we seek is not mere information, but rather it's a knowledge that brings about an inner transformation that culminates in the absence of suffering. And the term vijnana points to that aspect of this knowledge. Not mere information, but rather a transformative understanding. An understanding that transforms the way we see ourselves, and see ourselves related to other people, we see ourselves related to the world, and the way in which we see ourselves related to the Creator, God. That understanding of the relationship is transformed through this knowledge. The commentator says vijnanam, he says, is brahma anubhava paryantam. It is knowledge that culminates with enlightenment. And enlightenment, as you can understand, is the cessation of suffering. So that is the subject matter of this chapter, knowledge which culminates in this radical transformation of the way you think and understand your place and role in the world, an understanding, transformative understanding that culminates in enlightenment, freedom from suffering, which is exactly what he says in the last line. Yajñatva, having understood this knowledge, mokshase, you will be freed ashubhat, from ashubha. And ashubha literally means that which is inauspicious. But certainly we can understand it in a sense of you will be free from suffering. Ashubha, that which you don't want, is ashubha, suffering. Notice he doesn't say you will be freed from rebirth. And we've talked several times about how many people have this overly narrow understanding of moksha as merely freedom from rebirth. Yes, it is freedom from rebirth, but more importantly than that, it's freedom from suffering here and now. And that certainly is what Sri Krishna is referring to here. Okay, continuing. Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pavitramidam Uttamam, Pratyakshaavagamam dharmyam, Pratyakshaavagamam dharmyam, Susukham kartum avyayam, Susukham kartum avyayam. So here we return to the chapter's title. I'll just remind you, the titles are not part of the Bhagavad Gita itself. These titles are added by later generations of scholars. And as we saw in chapter 8, sometimes a chapter can have different titles according to different scholars. But generally, this chapter is called Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam. So Raja Vidya, the king of knowledge, obviously is a metaphor. We're not talking about a king. We're talking about the highest of all kinds of knowledge. Knowledge of computers can give you a pretty good career these days and can pay the bills, but that knowledge of computers is not going to put an end to suffering in life. So in that sense, this knowledge uniquely can free you from suffering. Therefore, it is Raja Vidya, the highest of all forms of knowledge, and Raja Guhyam. This is a little bit more interesting. The most secret of all knowledge. If it's so secret, how are we talking about it here in public? It's present in the Bhagavad Gita and many other scriptures. It's been present in the Upanishads, which date back probably 3,000 years ago. So in what sense is this knowledge not just secret, but most secret? And that which is secret is that which is hidden. That which is most secret is that which is in plain view and still unrecognized. They use the term hidden in plain view. That which is hidden in plain view, that which you cannot recognize even when it's right in front of you, is most secret. And in what sense is this hidden in front of you? Well, you already know the highest teaching of the ancient rishis. The highest teaching of the ancient rishis is easily expressed in three little words that you've heard many times: tat tvam asi, you are that, meaning you, the individual, and tat, the absolute reality because of which the cosmos exists. You are identical to that. You've heard that statement so many times. You've understood it. It's right in front of you right now because we're talking about it. But is its truth realized? Is it owned up, so to speak, in terms of your personal experience right now? Do you experience yourself as being non-separate from that absolute reality we call Brahman? And this is what it means to be most secret. That knowledge is right in front of you, and yet it eludes your grasp. So that's the most secret, that which is immediately present in your understanding. And even though you understand the meaning of the words, the truth escapes your grasp. Not forever. Maybe for a while it'll escape. Sooner or later you will grasp that highest truth. And that's what this chapter is about, after all, to lead you to grasp that highest truth. So this, we're talking about that from the prior verse, jnanam, that knowledge, which is vijnana sahitam, that knowledge which culminates in enlightenment, freedom from suffering, that knowledge which is Raja Vidya, the highest of all teachings, Raja Guhyam, the most secret for the reasons we just described. And in the next line, Pavitram idam, you get to pick out the word idam in the middle, this. Idam knowledge, idam, this knowledge, is pavitram, purifying. Uttamam pavitram, the most purifying. And that's a very beautiful expression. What does it mean to be the most purifying? When you take a bath in the morning, it's an act of purification. Of course, you need to take another bath tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after. So it serves the purpose of purification, but clearly that purification, first of all, is temporary. Secondly, it's only purifying your body. What about your mind? What about your heart? What about your emotions? What about other non-physical aspects of you? So that bath is purifying for your stula sharira, your physical body. There are other forms of purification for the non-physical part of who you are. You know that we contrast the stula sharira, physical body, with the sukshma sharira, the subtle body. The subtle body is that which is inside your physical body, enlivening it, gives life to your body. It includes all of your sense faculties, includes all of your mental faculties, it includes your life energy, prana. All of this collectively forms the sukshma sharira. The bath you take in the morning is purifying for the stula sharira. But for the sukshma sharira, we have other modes of purification, like prayer, like performance of rituals. These purify your mind and heart, and even they cause a subtle purification when you do some kind of ritual worship, and especially what's called prayashchitta karmas, karmas which are karmas which are meant to erase the effects or lessen the effects of bad deeds that you've done. If you've done some papa karma, some sinful act, there are certain rituals that can be done to remove the effects, the karmic effects of those harmful, incorrect behaviors that you've done. That's a kind of purification. So there's the performance of rituals, especially prayaschitta karma, which can purify your sukshma sharira, the locus of your karmas, after all. So there's a karmic purification associated with your subtle body. Also, and as I said at the outset, in a very simple sense, prayer is a very powerful purifying in the sense that if you feel disturbed, if you feel agitated, and even if you feel maybe hurt or upset, prayer can help remove those undesirable feelings. So in this way, prayer has a way of purifying the subtle body, in this case your mind and heart. So a bath can purify your stula sharira. The prayers and rituals can purify your sukshma sharira. And now somebody will ask, Swamiji, what about the karana sharira, the so-called causal body? And this term causal body is used a lot without any comprehension of what it truly is. And this is not the time or place for a really long analysis of these three bodies. So let's just make it very simple. Karana sharira, sharira body, karana causal body. Cause means the cause for the other two. The cause for the stula sharira, the cause for the sukshma sharira. Causal body means cause. What is the cause for your stula sharira? What is the cause for the sukshma sharira? And we're going to skip a very long, complicated Vedantic discussion right now and simply say, ultimately, the cause is ignorance. Why did you get reborn? Because you weren't enlightened in your last life. Why did your sukshma sharira, at the end of your last life, why did your sukshma sharira not merge into Brahman for all eternity? We had that discussion in chapter 8. Why did it not merge? You weren't enlightened. The presence of ignorance is what causes the ongoing travel of the sukshma sharira, and of course for the subtle body to travel it requires a physical body, stula sharira. So the ultimate cause for being born again and again is ignorance, and not just any kind of ignorance, ignorance of your true nature, the kind of ignorance that keeps you bound to this cycle of rebirth. And where did it go? I just lost my train of thought. It just went away. That's funny. And this ignorance is what we call karana sharira. So when we call it sharira, it's figurative. So when we call this stula sharira, it's not figurative. It really is a body, sharira, body. When we call the sukshma sharira, it's also kind of figurative. It's not really a body. It's rather intelligence that abides in his body, forces of intelligence that abides in his body. So it's not a physical thing at all. And certainly when we come to karana sharira, the term sharira is very loosely loose. So karana sharira simply means ignorance. Now back to our topic. A bath will purify your physical body, stula sharira. Prayer and rituals, other things also, will purify your sukshma sharira, subtle body. And what will purify the karana sharira? Well, karana sharira is ignorance. What removes ignorance, of course, is knowledge. It's that simple. So that which purifies the karana sharira, that which removes ignorance, and in particular, the ignorance that causes rebirth, the ignorance that prevents you from being enlightened, liberated, that ignorance is removed. Idam uttamam pavitram, and that is the highest, the most purifying knowledge, because it gets rid of the ultimate cause for the rebirth into a life of suffering again and again. Also, there's some other factors. When we call it uttamam, highest, we'll see more as we go on. So other ways in which this is the highest knowledge. It is the most purifying. In the third line, it is pratyaksha avagamam. Pratyaksha means available to your experience. We have to get the right meaning for it here. It is not remote from your experience. It is available to your experience. Pratyaksha literally means visible, but you can't take it too literally. You're not going to, with your eyeballs, you're not going to see this knowledge. So when it says pratyaksha avagamam, it means avagamam, ascertained by means of pratyaksha, means available to your experience. The commentator uses the term sakshi pratyaksham. It is knowable to your consciousness. It is present in your awareness. It is knowable in an experiential way. Now, this term experience simply means whatever is present in your awareness is experienced. We don't need to get so fancy. By the way, let me make it very clear. We are not talking about some kind of extraordinary experience here, some kind of mystical or meditative experience, not even samadhi. We're talking about a very ordinary experience because a discussion we've had from the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita is this. You are said to have a divine inner nature. That inner divinity has been the truth of who you are from the moment of birth, from the moment of conception. That inner divinity is present here and now. That inner divinity is an aspect of Ishvara, the God of the cosmos. That's why we call it divine, right? In order for it to be divine, it must be an aspect of divinity, an aspect of God. So that aspect of Ishvara, that inner divinity, is present here and now in this ordinary experience. It's present how? As awareness itself. Awareness is present in your experience right now. Awareness is that because of which you experience anything and everything. That awareness, which is present in your experience right now, is, in fact, a manifestation of that ultimate reality called Brahman, or we can use the other term Ishvara, a manifestation of that divinity that we call Ishvara. It is not remote from your experience. And this is another way of seeing that most secret of all, and that is, even though the truth you seek is present right now in your experience, it is present as the awareness because of which you're having this experience, the experience of being in this lecture hall. That awareness, the truth of that awareness, is the absolute reality that you seek to know through these teachings of Vedanta. And even though it is present in your experience right this moment, it still remains hidden. Go figure. This is the power of ignorance. We say that ignorance has the power to veil or conceal or obscure that which we want to know. And this is the power, the veiling power, and power means it's quite powerful. The fact that it can prevent you from recognizing an already present reality, a reality present in your experience and yet unrecognized due to that veiling power of ignorance. On the other hand, it is present in your experience, therefore it is pratyaksha avagamam, available in an experiential way. It is also dharmyam. Dharmyam is an adjectival form of dharma. So that which is a manifestation. You can't take dharma here as righteousness. Doesn't have dharma. If you look up dharma in a dictionary, you'll find a dozen meanings. So here, dharma, I think maybe the best meaning is you could take it as teachings. It is an aspect of these teachings, or my translation here, it is sacred, as another translation for dharmyam. So this knowledge is born, the knowledge which is the highest and most purifying knowledge, which is the most secret, which is the highest of all knowledge. It is dharmyam. You can take it as it comes from these teachings, is one meaning, or as I've written here, it is sacred. Then, this knowledge is also susukam kartum. It is susukam, easily, kartum, done. It is easily done, easily obtained. Sukha means easily. Sukha means really easily. Huh? We just got done saying it is the most secret, and then it almost looks like a contradiction to say that it is easily attained, easily grasped. If you, and it's true, and here's how we resolve this. It looks kind of contradictory. It's not. Here's how to understand it. How difficult is it to see me sitting here? Susukam kartum. Easily done. Close your eyes now. Now, with your eyes closed, how easy is it to see me? It's impossible. With your eyes closed, you can open your eyes now. It's impossible to, otherwise. So, but you see my point. If your eyes are open, it's the easiest thing in the world when you are ready to discover this truth. When you have scriptures, when you have access to the scriptures with the help of a guru, when you have shastra and guru, and then the third aspect, your eyes are open in the sense that you are ready, you are prepared. When there is the alignment of these three factors, guru, shastra, put it in other order, shastra, teachings, guru, to help you understand those shastra. Shastra means scripture. Shastra, scripture, guru, teacher, and the third factor, your eyes are open, you're ready. When those three factors are in alignment, so to speak, it is effortless. Susukam kartum. Also, this knowledge is avyayam. It doesn't go away. It is imperishable. There's one good thing about ignorance. What a funny observation. The good thing about ignorance is when you get rid of it, it doesn't come back. It's destroyed, it's gone, it's over with. Once you're enlightened, your life of struggle comes to an end, so it doesn't come back. Avyayam. Next. Ashraddhadhana purusha, ashraddhadhana purusha, dharmasyasya parantapa, dharmasyasya parantapa, aprapya mam nivartante, aprapya mam nivartante, mrityu samsara vartmani, mrityu samsara vartmani. Purushaha, plural, people. People who are ashraddhadhanaha. Shraddhadhana is one who has shraddha, faith. Faith in what? We just got done talking about Shastra and Guru. So, Shraddhadhana is one who has faith in Shastra, scripture, and Guru, the teacher. Ashraddhadhana. Those who do not have faith in the Shastra and the Guru, those people who have no access to Shastra and Guru, those people whose eyes are closed. Even if you have Shastra and Guru and your eyes are closed. Anyway, for such, here though, I think better to take it in a former sense. Those who have no faith in Shastra and Guru, which means they don't pursue the Shastra with the help of a Guru. So they are ashraddhadhana, they have no faith. Asya dharmasya in the second line. And here dharma clearly means teaching. Asya dharma, in this teaching that Sri Krishna is imparting to Arjuna, there are many people who have no faith, no commitment. Faith here is maybe the wrong word to use. How about this? Recognition of value is, I think, much more clear in this context. There are people who have a value for these teachings, as you clearly do, but there are so many people who have no value for these teachings. Okay? So for those people who are ashraddhadhana, they have no value, asya dharmasya, in these teachings. Parantapa, O mighty Arjuna, what about them? Aprapya mam, in the third line, aprapya, having failed to reach mam, Sri Krishna says. And remember, when he, as we saw in chapter 8, when he says mam, me, he is not referring to himself as an individual incarnation, as Sri Krishna, born of Devaki. He is talking about himself as the God of the cosmos. He's talking about himself as the ultimate reality, Brahman. So, aprapya mam, having failed to reach that ultimate reality, having failed to become enlightened. Why have they failed to become enlightened? Because they have no value for these teachings, ashraddhadhana. They have no value for these teachings, so failing to get enlightened, nivartante, they return after this life comes to an end. We just got done with chapter 8, talking about end of life. So when this life comes to an end, having failed to gain enlightenment, nivartante, they return where? Mrityu samsara vartmani. Vartman is path. They return to this path of mrityu samsara. Samsara, the literal meaning of samsara is that which continues. That which goes on and on and on and on and on. And notice what goes on and on and on here is mrityu, death. Everyone says that according to the Hindu tradition, you're born again and again and again. And that doesn't sound so bad. But here, Sri Krishna says, no, you die again and again and again. That doesn't sound so good. Dying is dying. So this mrityu samsara, this continual process of birth and death and suffering, one returns to that, having failed to get this knowledge. Okay, that is Sri Krishna's introduction. And with the next two verses, he is going to, a funny American idiom just came to my mind. He's going to blow your socks off. What in the world does that mean? That's a common American, I don't know, where does that come? Blow your socks off. Anyway, next two verses, very powerful verses, and I'd like to give you a brief introduction before we jump into those verses, and I'd like to go to the board to give you that introduction. So let me go up and give you a division between two perspectives on reality, two perspectives on Ishvara. There are two commonly used terms in Western philosophy which are very helpful, and they have very closely connected words in Sanskrit, so I'd like to share this with you. First is immanent, and the other is transcendent. I'll define these in just a moment. These are two perspectives on reality. A reality which is immanent. Immanent means here, now. And the other perspective is transcendent, that which is beyond. A reality which is here now is immanent. A reality which is beyond our mind and senses is transcendent. According to the ancient rishis, Ishvara, the God of the cosmos, is both. Two aspects. One aspect of Ishvara is immanent, here, now, and all of this will be explained in the next two verses. So one aspect of Ishvara is here, now, immanent. Another aspect of Ishvara is transcendent, beyond our mind and thought and imagination. These are related to two Sanskrit terms, a little complicated terms, but important. One is vyavaharika, which will translate as empirical. Is that on the board? Yes. And the other one, other aspect, transcendent aspect, we use the term paramartika, which means empirical, let's call it absolute. Okay. So here we have a way of, a twofold way of understanding Ishvara. And that's what Sri Krishna is going to explain in the next two verses. Sri Krishna is going to explain an aspect of Ishvara which is immanent, here, now, which means vyavaharika, part of our worldly experience, empirical in nature. And it's going to be contrasted with the following verse, which talks about a transcendent aspect of Ishvara. A transcendent aspect, which is paramartika, belongs to an absolute level of reality. We can say this, vyavaharika means empirical reality, paramartika means absolute reality. These are two perspectives on Ishvara, God of the cosmos, and loosely we could use terms like apara, lower, and para, higher. We use these adjectives in in Sanskrit, apara, lower aspect, and para, a higher aspect. We can also use this. We just want this structure in our minds before we see the next two verses. The first verse is going to talk about the immanent nature of Ishvara, and the second is going to talk about the transcendent nature of Ishvara with a very jarring transition between the two. And you'll see that jarring transition in just a moment. Okay, back to our verses. Let's continue. Maya tatamidam sarvam, Maya tatamidam sarvam, jagadavyakta murtina, jagadavyakta murtina, matsthani sarva bhutani, matsthani sarva bhutani, nachaham teshvavastitaha, nachaham teshvavastitaha. So, from this immanent standpoint, the Vyavaharika standpoint, Sri Krishna says, Maya, by me, idam, this, sarvam, all of this what? Second line, jagat, world. This entire world, Maya, by me, Sri Krishna says, is tatam, pervaded. The entire world is pervaded by me. How? Sri Krishna says, avyakta murtina, murti, form. In my avyakta, we used that term quite a bit in the prior chapter, unmanifest. In my unmanifest, non-physical form, the entire universe is pervaded by me. Now, these are very lofty concepts, often a little abstract, so it's helpful to ground these teachings in a common metaphor that we've used here many, many times. And it's a metaphor of your dreams. Remember that metaphor? When you dream, you create a dream world. You sustain that dream world as long as you're dreaming. And when you wake up, that dream world returns to you. For your dream world and all the creatures in your dream world, for your dream world, you are Brahma, creator, Vishnu, sustainer, and Maheshwara, Shiva, so-called destroyer. So this is a very helpful metaphor. In your dream world are many objects. There are people and trees and buildings, whatever you dream about. What are those dream objects made of? Very funny question, but important. Those dream objects are made of your own awareness, your own consciousness. Everything in your mind, everything in your experience, I need to be a little bit more clear. This pot in my hand is made of clay. When you see the pot, there's a pot in your mind. The pot in your mind is obviously not made of clay. So then the pot in your mind is made of what? The content of this pot is clay. The content of the pot in your mind is consciousness. And not just pot, any thought, the content of any thought is consciousness. Whatever you think about is a thought. The content of the thought is consciousness. There's a pot thought in your mind. The content of that pot thought is consciousness. So just to get the idea, to explain how, when you have in your dream, if you see a tree, and in your dream, what is the dream tree made of? The trees outside here are made of wood. But the tree in your dream is not made of wood. What is its content? Right? Consciousness. Okay, you get that. So your consciousness, and that consciousness is you in the most fundamental sense. This is our discussion from chapter 2 onwards. You, in the most fundamental way, are not your body, not your mind, not your senses. In the most fundamental sense, your nature is consciousness, chit, or chaitanya, to use the Sanskrit terms. So fundamentally speaking, you are a conscious being. Fundamentally speaking, you are consciousness. They use the term Ch.9, the conscious self. You are, in a fundamental sense, that Ch.9. Now, going back to your dream, what is the dream tree made of? The dream tree is made of consciousness. That consciousness which is you, so could we not say the dream tree is made of you in a fundamental sense? The buildings you see in a dream are made of you, your consciousness. The people you meet in your dreams are made of you. Everything in your dream world has your consciousness as its content. So could we not say then that just as clay is in this pot, consciousness is in the pot in your mind, so we could say with regard to your dream world, your consciousness is in everything. Finally, we can say that in your dream world, you, the dreamer, are in everything. You pervade your dream world, just as this pot is pervaded by clay. Your dream world is pervaded by your consciousness. Are you with me? Your dream world is pervaded by your consciousness. Why? Because your consciousness is the content of whatever exists in your dream world. That's why Sri Krishna says, Maya, by me, idam sarvam jagat, this entire world, mayi tatam, it is pervaded by me. And notice the metaphor. Just as you pervade your dream world as consciousness, the content of everything that exists, in the same way, Ishvara pervades this universe as the content of whatever exists. Ishvara is the content because of which this chair exists, the content because of which this cloth exists, the content because of which this body exists. So if we were to say, where in this world, not dream world, this world, where in this world is Ishvara, we have to say everywhere. Ishvara is the content of whatever exists. Just as your consciousness is the content of everything in your dream world, Ishvara, God of the cosmos, is the content of everything in this world. This is the immanent standpoint. Remember those two words. Immanent means immediately present. If we ask, where is Ishvara? Ishvara is here now. Ishvara is never remote in any sense. You've heard the story. The student comes to his teacher and says, "Oh, master, have you seen God?" And the master says, if the master spoke casual American English, the master would say, "Sure, I see God everywhere, all the time. I'm seeing God right now," the master says as he's looking at the student. This is the immanent perspective. So, Sri Krishna says, Idam sarvam jagat, this entire world is maya tatam, pervaded by me, avyakta murtina, in my unmanifest form, meaning not Sri Krishna, the person standing in Arjuna's chariot. So in the unmanifest form as the reality because of which the universe exists. And he continues, Matstani sarva bhutani. Sarva bhutani, all that exists, all creatures, all that exists, is matstani, important term, has its existence in me, literally stands in me. Matstani has its basis in me, has its foundation in me, exists because of me, just as this pot in my hand exists because of clay, just as the pot in your mind right now exists because of consciousness, just as everything in your dream world exists because of consciousness, in the same way, everything in this entire universe, idam sarvam jagat, it exists because of the presence of Ishvara that gives reality to it, to whatever exists. So, matstani sarva bhutani, all that exists has its existence in me. Sri Krishna says, I am the indwelling reality because of which everything exists. But then he makes us a correction here. He says, Nacha aham teshu avastitaha. The beings abide in me, I don't abide in them. Aham, I, teshu, in them, na avastitaha, I don't abide in them. And this we have to work on. We actually saw this, I think, someplace in chapter 8, someplace recently, but it's something a little confusing. Sri Krishna says that I give reality to everything, giving existence to everything. In that sense, everything that exists has this reality in me, exists in me, but I don't exist in them, meaning I am not stuck inside them. I joked, in chapter 8, I think I joked about the color lithographs you see of this little 6-inch tall Lord Vishnu inside of somebody's chest, shining. He's got his chakra and shankha, his discus and his holy conch, and he's standing there, and there's this blue aura or glow around Lord Vishnu. And this is from the standpoint of our emotions. It's a beautiful image. But the idea of the God of the cosmos being stuck inside is a little limiting. Sri Krishna said in the first line, he pervades the universe. Pervading the universe just means that because your body is in the universe, therefore, your body being part of the universe is given reality, is given existence by Sri Krishna. What he wants to say here is to remove any concept of limitation. I gave this metaphor when we saw this before. I forget what was the context. I don't remember, but it was fairly recently. In the last several classes, we talked about this particular fact. That is, space pervades this room. True or false? True. Space is in this room is true. But it's also true that this room is in space. Space is in this room is true. This room is in space, we could say is more true. It is. It's more true. So that's what Sri Krishna is pointing out here. He says that everything that exists is in me. I am not in them, putting the focus, shifting the focus. Instead of saying the room, instead of saying space is in the room, we get the bigger picture. The room is in space. Here, the bigger picture is, instead of saying, I exist in your heart, Sri Krishna flips it and says, you exist in me. Look at the difference. Sri Krishna does say, I exist in your heart. But then here he flips a perspective. I exist in your heart in a limited sense, but in the bigger picture, you exist in me. Everything exists in Ishvara. This is the immanent perspective, what we call vyavaharika, empirical, because we're talking about Ishvara, Ishvara's presence here and now, in and through the world, as a reality because of which everything exists. And then, this is where you get your socks blown off, as I joked with you in the next verse. Nacha matstani bhutani, nacha matstani bhutani, pashya me yogam aishwaram, pashya me yogam aishwaram, bhuta bhrannacha bhutasto, bhuta bhrannacha bhutasto, mamatma bhuta bhavanaha, mamatma bhuta bhavanaha. Prior verse, he said, matstani bhutani. All beings exist in me. Then what does he say here? Nacha! But all beings do not reside in me. Look at this. The prior verse, go back one verse, third line, matstani sarva bhutani, all beings have their existence in me. And then in this next verse, nacha matstani bhutani. It looks like an immediate contradiction. Politicians are good at contradicting themselves. There's that one woman who's testifying before the House panel, and she said, I never said that. Oh, wait a minute. Literally. She said, I never said that, and then she had to retract her statement because she did say that. My point is, politicians contradict themselves all the time. Sri Krishna is not a politician. He's not contradicting himself. Then why do the statements look absolutely contradictory? They look contradictory because we have just shifted from the immanent standpoint to the transcendent standpoint. From an immanent standpoint, Sri Krishna says, everything exists in me. I am the underlying reality in which all beings have their existence. Now he says, from a transcendent point of view, nacha matstani bhutani. All beings do not abide in me. This is very lofty, so we need to go back to our metaphor to get a more concrete understanding. That's why we use metaphors. Drishtantas, we call them in Sanskrit. They help take these abstract concepts and make them much more accessible. So going back to our dream metaphor, we've said already that it is your consciousness that is in and through your dream world that gives existence to everything in your dream world. Now we shift our perspective. Not talking about your dream or dream world, but talking about you, the dreamer. You, the dreamer, laying in bed. You, the dreamer, who's about to wake up, and that whole dream world will just pop. It'll go away in just an instant. That dream world is a little blip, a little bubble in your experience. The truth of you, the dreamer, the one who's about to wake up, get out of bed and go on with his or her life, that perspective is absolutely beyond the dream world. It's a whole different perspective. This is the transcendent perspective, the perspective we called paramartika, absolute perspective. So Sri Krishna says, when he shifts perspective like this, from this immanent perspective, Sri Krishna is here now. Then he says, Nacha matstani bhutani, all creatures do not exist in me. Sri Krishna is referring to an absolute perspective, paramartika perspective, on his existence being beyond names and forms, nama rupa, beyond your mind, beyond your imagination. Sri Krishna is referring to himself now from this absolute perspective, from the perspective of pure existence, from the perspective of Brahman. Now, I'll try to, there's so much more to be taught here, which we have to save for our next class. So to wrap this class up, notice he says here in the next line, Pashya me, look at me, my, yogam aishwaram. Yogam here means power, aishwaram, divine. Look at my divine power, look at my majestic nature, look at my transcendent nature. Pashya, look, with amazement, look. When you shift perspectives, because from the perspective of, here, Sri Krishna let me just end by giving you some little concrete terms here. Many people ask, what is the difference between Ishvara and Brahman? Ishvara, God, as creator, sustainer, destroyer. Brahman as absolute reality. Ishvara is immanent. Ishvara is the God of the cosmos who gives reality to everything that exists. Brahman is transcendent, beyond the world, beyond in this sense, from the standpoint of absolute reality, there is no world. Not as hard as it sounds. From the standpoint of clay, there's no pot. There's only clay. You've heard me say how many times? This is 6 ounces of clay. How much does a pot add to the 6 ounces? Nothing at all. Pot is an idea. It's nama rupa, name and form. From the perspective of pot, we can say this pot is made of clay. Just as from the immanent perspective, we can say the universe is made of Ishvara. Very simple, actually. This pot is made of clay. This world is made of Ishvara. That's our lower perspective, immanent perspective. Now, shift. From the perspective of clay, what pot? From the perspective of Brahman, absolute reality, there is only that reality. There's only clay. From the standpoint of Brahman, there is only Brahman. Pot is a transient name and form. Just as when you dream, your dream world, names and forms, they come and go. But you, the dreamer, are a whole other layer of reality, level of reality. Dream comes and goes, but you, the dreamer, are an abiding reality. Pot can come and go. Before the pot was, clay was. When this pot is no more, clay will be. Pot comes and goes. The existence of clay is abiding. The existence of your dream world comes and goes. The dreamer is abiding. The existence of this world that we experience comes and goes. But the absolute reality doesn't come and go. An abiding absolute reality. We use the word Brahman to describe that absolute reality as opposed to Ishvara, creator, sustainer, destroyer. I think that's the most clear way to put it. Ishvara exists in relationship to a world, in relationship to creation, as creator, sustainer, destroyer. Brahman didn't create anything. Brahman doesn't sustain anything. Why? Because from Brahman's perspective, there's only Brahman. There's no world to create or sustain. There's only Brahman. This is a very lofty perspective, and notice how he shifts his perspective so suddenly between those two verses. We'll come back to this verse and see much more in our next class. Before we conclude today, a couple of announcements. I mentioned in our last class that we're working on these Bhagavad Gita videos where we have actors performing as Sri Krishna and Arjuna. And this is a last chance if you would like to audition for the role of Sanjaya or Dhritarashtra. So we're about to move ahead with this last step of production. So if you would like to be considered for the role of Sanjaya, which means you will be in costume, chanting the verses of the Bhagavad Gita in front of a camera. If you would like to participate in this project, please send me an email today or tomorrow, because we need to move on with this project. Also, I mentioned in the last class that I'm looking for someone to help me with the video production. There's a lot of Photoshop work to be done, and it's very time-consuming, and I spend a lot of time doing that. If you are a skillful user of Photoshop, you have to be a skillful user. If you are a skillful user of Photoshop and have the time to volunteer to help me, then please send me an email. Good. We'll conclude our brief prayers at the altar. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashrinvan Utabasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukhka Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.